Hey guys, Desolator Magic here, and I guess Wizards got you all a Christmas present. They got you digital images of almost all of the Masterpiece cards that are going to be in Aether Revolt. Now these are going to be exceptionally rare because nobody opens a 184 card set. I've heard that worldwide people cut their orders like crazy if they sell singles, so a lot less packs are getting opened. With how rare these are and how many there are, that means these are going to be pretty hard to get, sort of. It's not like they've been short printing any standard set since Return to Ravnica. The first card is Arcbound Ravagers. It was first printed in Dark Steel, and then that was it until the very first Modern Masters, so it's always nice to get a Modern Masters 1 card back. It's a horribly unfair disgrace of a card that I'm sure is played in some kind of affinity deck. I don't exactly memorize the top net decks. Next up is a very old card. This one was printed in the whole Alpha, Beta, Unlimited, Revised, and then actually 4th edition, and after that it was barely seen. Now here's the thing. The original artwork was a vice, which apparently you can spell vice with an S. Who knew? Now if you look at the artwork from the Vault Relics, that looks an awful lot like a mask. I mean, that's kind of debatable, it's kind of creepy and weird, but Vise is an Old English word for a mask, or basically some sort of face covering. So the Masterpiece one will be the tiebreaker, right? No, I have no idea what that is. I honestly couldn't tell you. Doesn't look like a vice or a vise. I'd wear it on my face, but it looks kind of big and heavy and made out of metal. I'm going to take a wild guess they probably should have spelled it vice because when it enters the battlefield you choose an opponent and at the beginning of the chosen player's upkeep, it deals X damage to that player where X is the number of cards in their hand minus 4. That's a fantastic card if you get it out on turn 1. There's actually a theme with all of these. They're massively unfair, very, very, very hated cards. Speaking of that, Chalice of the Void, everybody's favorite. Chalice of the Void is so hated that they had to restrict it in Vintage. You pay double X, so 2 is 1, 4 is 2, etc., and you can also cast this for 0. Oh yes, this is some broken crap. It enters battlefield with, X charge counters on it. Whenever a player casts a spell with converted mana cost equal to the number of charge counters on Chalice of the Void, counter that spell. It is almost always used for 0. This is another ancient card from way, way back in Mirrodin, but it was also printed in Modern Masters 1. I'm seeing a theme here. Next up, we've got Defense Grid. I personally hate this card. It comes out for 2, it's an artifact, and each spell costs 3 colorless more to cast, except during its controller's turn. It is impossible to play around this card, but it's not even that great of a card, it's more of like a sideboard card, because basically if you don't cast anything on your opponent's turn, it doesn't affect you at all. It's a fun card in Commander though, especially multiplayer. That is some funny crap. Now, it was last printed in Urza's Legacy and then 8th and 9th edition before that, but it's only worth about $4, so a questionable choice there. I like the artwork, though. That's pretty cool. Next up, we've got a card that was just printed twice in Eternal Masters. This wonderful $3 card is Duplicant. It costs 6, and it has imprint, which states when Duplicant enters the battlefield, you may exile target non-token creature. So I'm used to imprint always exiling cards from your hand, obviously Isochron Scepter, but I assume this means it has to be on the battlefield, that's why they said non-token. So if you want to duplicate some 10-10, you already have to have a 10-10 on the field, so this would almost always target your opponent's creatures, so you wait for them to bring out something just nuts, and then exile that. I could see that being a little bit better than a removal spell, although it does cost 6. They bring out some monstrous creature, instead of just getting rid of it, you get rid of it and get a copy of your own. Oh, by the way, I should probably read what the rest of it does. As long as the card exiled with Duplicant is a creature card, he basically becomes that creature. So, same power, same toughness, same creature type, etc. Oh, except it doesn't gain any of its activated abilities or triggered abilities. Next up is yet another card that was printed in Modern Masters 1 as a rare, and before that it was 5th Dawn, so that needed a reprint. It's Engineered Explosives, and in keeping with the theme, I hate this card. It has Sunburst, which, if you didn't notice so far, they didn't really describe any of the mechanics at all on any of these cards. I thought that was questionable. I don't know. It honestly wouldn't have fit very well, but Sunburst is, the multicolor where it enters the battlefield with a charge counter for each color of mana that was spent to cast it. With it being straight X, it's a pretty good card. Then you pay 2, sacrifice it, and destroy each non-land permanent with converted mana cost equal to the number of charge counters on engineered explosives. This stands about the same chance of hurting the person casting it as it does hurting the opponent, although they can look at the board state and short it on purpose. So not a great card, but very annoying. It is actually about $36 though, which is really saying something. Next up, we've got one of the number one disgraces of a card that is ruining Modern right now, Ensnaring Bridge. I hate this card almost more than Kitchen Finks. This is in my top 5 for cards that need to get the hell out of Modern. I hate this card. Creatures with power greater than the number of cards in your hand can't attack. So in other words, you can't attack, you can't win, you can't use creatures, you're screwed. It's kind of like a board wipe every single turn for the rest of the game. This is almost always played in a deck where your opponent completely empties their hand, so basically they play this for 3 and win the game. It is such an absolute pile of crap. It's also worth like $30, so you know people are going to go nuts about this stupid Masterpiece edition. I hope they keep in the tradition of printing something as a premium, hyper rare, and then banning it. That would be fantastic. Next up, we've got Extraplanar Lens, another artifact that costs 3. It has imprint, and when it enters battlefield, of course, you exile a land you control this time, not a creature or spell. When a land with the same name as the exiled card is tapped for mana, its controller adds 1 mana to his or her mana pool of any type that land produced. So that's pretty handy whether it's basic or not. I mean, you've only got 4 copies of non-basics, so it basically is just crypt-gassed, but cheaper and harder to destroy. So that's actually a really, really, really nice card. Very, very good mana ramp. It was only printed in Mirrodin, but it's only about a $10 card. Next up, we've got a card that surprisingly is only about $8. It was printed in Tempest and Tempest Remastered, which I think might have been an online-only set, if I remember correctly. Either way, it is basically the sequel to Millstone, which is why you call mill decks. You bring it out for 1, and for 3 you can tap it, and target player puts the top 2 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. If both cards share a color, repeat this process. So it's basically a crappy Sphinx's tutelage. I mean, if you can generate a boatload of mana, you could mill them out, but it's going to take a while with this card. I think a lot more people just play it because it's a 1-cost artifact, honestly. In keeping with the tradition of dickish cards that are universally hated by everyone, they printed Meekstone. It is a 1-cost artifact. That's right, 1. Creatures with power 3 or greater don't untap during their controller's untap steps. Thank God this isn't legal in Modern. Meekstone was printed to death in the early days of Magic, so it's only worth about $2 to $3. Very questionable choice for the Masterpiece set. I guess they just really wanted all artifacts. Next up, that's right, yet again, another one of the most hated cards in all of Modern. It's Oblivion Stone, which was really only printed in Mirrodin. It was in one of the Commander sets, though. So for 3, you bring it out, and for 4, you tap and put a fate counter on target permanent. Then you pay 5, so it's expensive, and then tap it, sacrifice Oblivion Stone, and destroy each non-land permanent without a fate counter on it, then remove all fate counters from all permanents. So over a couple turns, you pick out a couple cards that are unbelievably powerful, then nuke everything else and win the game. The only thing making this moderately fair is the obscene amount of mana you need to put into it. Every time I play against this, though, they don't have a problem, dropping a couple counters and then just nuking everything. Very, very, very annoying card. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. Next up, very unusual choice, but I like it. Ornithopter, the famous 0-drop 0-2 with flying. This was actually recently legal in Standard, of course. I think it's, a 25-cent card? I mean, there were some very questionable choices for this Masterpiece set. They basically just chose a whole bunch of dummy fillers and then a couple really famous cards. The funny thing is some of these cards were in need of a reprint, but I don't think these are going to make the price go down. Next up, we've got Sphere of Resistance. Pretty basic card here. Drop it for 2. Spells cost 1 colorless more. There were better versions of this card that are more specific and more effective in, Origins. Unfortunately, this was only printed in Exodus and Vintage Masters, so it's about a $13 card. Next up, we've got the Legend, Staff of Domination. This is the trading post on steroids. Oh, except without the goats, of course, and if it doesn't generate goats, I'm not interested. So this is a rather strange one. You throw it out for 3, and it looks like equipment, but you don't actually equip it. So you can pay 1 colorless, or 1 generic, whatever, to untap the staff. So if you can generate like 30 or 40 mana, you can do some messed up stuff with this, and that's not that hard to do. If you pay 2 and tap it, you gain 1 life, not very impressive. If you pay 3 mana and tap it, untap target creature, there's an infinite loop for you. Then if you pay 4, you can tap another target creature, and if you pay 5, you can draw a card. So none of those are all that powerful, but it's basically just a utility infinite loop mobile. This was only played in 5th Dan, so it's usually worth about $15. The price is creeping up and people want a copy of this card, so Wizards was like, okay, we'll reprint it for more money in a more expensive form. You're welcome. And next up, no surprise whatsoever, Sword of Body and Mind. Everybody pretty much saw this coming. It's another one of the 5 swords. The first 3 were in the last set of masterpieces, and equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has pro green and pro blue. Whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you create a 2/2 green wolf token, and that player puts the top 10 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard, and it has an equip 2 cost. Pretty effective, pretty random, pretty annoying. Next up, we've got Sundering Titan. When it enters the battlefield or leaves the battlefield, choose a land of each basic land type, then destroy those lands. So you would, destroy 1 mountain, 1 plains, 1, forest, etc. It does cost 8 and it's a 7/10, but if you start shutting down your opponent's mana base, that is not good. Now you guys probably spotted the problem with this card just as quickly as I did. If your opponent controls a plains, a forest, and an island, and you control a mountain, you have to destroy your own mountain. So since this is such an overpriced raging pile of crap, it's only worth about $4. It looks cool though. Next up, Sword of War and Peace. This is the 5th sword, of course. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 as pro red, pro white. Its on-hit ability is whenever it deals combat damage to a player, it deals damage to that player equal to the number of cards in his or her hand, and you gain 1 life for each card in your hand. That is some power right there. I really hope I open that at the pre-release. Next up is Trinosphere, which this time around is not a sphere, I guess. Some of this artwork is, good looking, but deeply confusing. You know the card is good when it's restricted in Vintage, and it is. What does it do, you ask? Well, as long as Trinosphere is untapped, each spell that would cost less than 3 mana to cast actually does cost 3 mana to cast. So if you've got a 1 or 2 cost, haha, screw you, you're paying more for it. All around, not that great of a card, and you can pick it up for about $8 these days. I guess the theme was really annoying control artifacts that nobody plays. This next one actually is a pretty darn good card. It's Vedalken Shackles. Cast it for 3, and you may choose not to untap it during your untap step. That's always powerful. For 2, you can tap it and gain control of target creature with power less than or equal to the number of islands you control for as long as Vedalken Shackles remains tapped. So not the most powerful card, but in blue, it's pretty darn good. You'd have to be running almost exclusively islands, though, which opens you up to people destroying or completely tapping down all of your islands. Welcome to Modern. This card was actually printed as a mythic in the first Modern Masters, and before that, it was only in 5th Dan. I think it's a fun card if you can get it to work. You probably won't, though. Next up, I'm sure you all know this card, Wormcoil Engine, a 6/6 for 6 that everybody puts in their Tron decks. This card is good, but it's not too good. I'd say it's still relatively fair. It's very annoying, though. It has Death Touch and Lifelink, and when it dies, you create a 3/3 colorless worm artifact token with Death Touch and a 3/3 colorless worm artifact creature with Lifelink. So in other words, it just splits into 2 and you have to kill it 2 more times. That is deeply annoying, especially when they have 2 instances of Death Touch. You can pretty much only exile this, otherwise it's going to be a problem. At least it doesn't also have hexproof. Totally sounds like something they would do. This card's sitting around $13, so I think this might be one of the kind of high cards. Next up, oh god, Platinum Angel. If you're thinking about getting your hands on one of these because of the amazing artwork or the fact that you're a fan of Platinum Angel, sorry, I'm going to take out a loan on everything I own, buy up every single copy, and burn it. What does it do? Oh, it just says you can't lose the game and your opponents can't win the game, one of the single most unfair cards in existence. Yeah, it costs 7, but take a guess if most people playing this actually pay 7 for it. And if they do, they start stacking hexproof and indestructible and everything else on it. So, yeah, not anybody's favorite card. If you play this, you're a terrible person. Next up is Pithing Needle, very, very, very popular, well-known card. You throw it out for 1, and when it enters battlefield, name a card. Activated abilities of the sources with the chosen name can't be activated unless they're mana abilities. I like this card because it is the great equalizer. If you've just got some horrific, unbelievably unfair, stupidly annoying card that your opponent's playing, just kill the activated ability on it. The fact that it only costs 1 and is colorless, oh my gosh, is this a popular card. This card was a pretty strange choice though, because it was in 10th edition, M10, Saviors of Kamigawa, and Return to Ravnica as a rare. Now you might recall Return to Ravnica is being heavily targeted for Modern Masters 2017, so we're almost definitely going to see this again. Plus, the card's about $2. Very, very strange choice. I mean, it's a noteworthy artifact, but anything past that, I wouldn't have made it a masterpiece. Now, you might have noticed that that's only 22 cards. Actually, if you did notice that, that's kind of weird. Like, why were you counting? Now, I could have sworn that they said it was 30-20, but I might be remembering that wrong. In fact, I went back to the original announcement, and then I suspected that they altered it, so I went to archive.org and looked up the initial edition, and no, apparently I'm just remembering it wrong. What they had actually said word for word was the number of Masterpiece Series cards may fluctuate, but roughly speaking, we expect each Masterpiece Series to be around 50 cards for the whole block. Kaladesh Inventions, for example, will have 30 cards in Kaladesh and 24 cards in Aether Revolt, so I guess I just didn't add that up correctly or something. Here's the thing though, I only named 22 cards, didn't I? In fact, that's all that's been leaked. Well, if I were to think about it logically, I deeply suspect that the remaining 2 cards are actually cards in Aether Revolt. Remember the Gear Hulks? I believe they had made another statement about some of the cards being legal in the set that they're actually in. Last time around, out of the 30, it was the 5 Gear Hulks, and I believe that was it. So I'm thinking the 2 that we haven't seen yet are actually artifacts in Aether Revolt, and they haven't been leaked yet, so they didn't leak the Masterpiece Edition either. So hopefully that wraps up that little mystery. What do you guys think of these? What do you think of the choices? I think they're all universally very, very weak. A couple of them are like, cards I've heard of, cards I've played with or played against. I get it. Some of them are just like really cool for flavor, like Ornithopter. I think the artwork is fantastic, although some of the cards are massively inaccurate to their original version. My only major complaint about these is a whole bunch of them are not worth a damn thing. Every single detail that we know about Aether Revolt points to it being worthless, like the singles are going to be just horrifically low. You don't have 30 cards be valuable in a 184 card set. That's just not how it works. Some of the cards I've seen already don't even look that great, so that does not bode well. Oh, but the saving grace of Standard, the thing that's going to push down all the prices of all the singles even further so that they're even more affordable, is the Masterpieces, right? Well, not if we've got $10 to $15 Masterpieces. I mean, how much would you really pay for a premium Ornithopter? Now, they threw in some crazy stuff like the Sword of Body and Mind and a couple cards that are already $30, so there's your big bombs. But I would say probably nothing the same caliber as like Mana Vault and Mana Crypt. So I have kind of mixed feelings about it. I mean, it would be nice if they were all $150 cards or something like that, but I think that's kind of unreasonable. I guess if you say, hey, they were going for a mix of money and, stylistic and lore choices, okay, I get that. So depending upon what your personal goal and wishes were for the set, you could have drastically different opinions. Overall, I can't wait to pull a bunch of these, although I did reduce my normal order of 20 cases down to 2 cases because, screw Wizards. If they can't print a set with singles that are worth selling, then I'm not going to sell singles for them. It'll be fun to see how long it takes them to realize that. Oh, by the way, the U.S. Postal Service is upping its prices again, so the whole singles market is about to go down the toilet. But that's a topic for another video. I'll see you guys next video.